The Making of the Slavs by Florin Curta Book Review. Having been interested in the history of pre-Christian Slavs, I have heard about the controversy surrounding Curta's book, The Making of the Slavs. As I understood it, the book claims that pre-Christian Slavs did not call themselves Slavs, but were called that by medieval chroniclers. Since this is not at all a controversial statement on the ethno-linguistically Slavic side of the world, I did not pay much attention to Curta's book or the controversy. I assumed it was yet another hysterical, blown-out-of-proportion affair in the Slavophilic Anglosphere, of which the Slavophilic Anglosphere is full. But then I made a commitment to read more about the Slavs in English, so I decided to read the book. Now, having read it, I can say with confidence that the Curta controversy is yet another hysterical, blown-out-of-proportion affair in the Slavophilic Anglosphere. However, the reasons I think so have changed. Curta is clearly very well read in the history and archaeology of the Slavs, and it shows. His critical analysis of the historical sources is thorough, incisive, and well argued. His critical analysis of the archaeological evidence is even better, particularly the parts where he dismantles some older theses made by 19th and 20th century German and Soviet archaeologists, who attempted to make claims about the ethnicity of people based on the shape of broken pieces of pottery. Because these critical analyses make up 90% of the book, I found the book highly enjoyable and fun to read, and I would very much recommend it to anyone who, like me, enjoys data-driven and evidence-based scholarly discourse. The problem of the book is not Curta's critical analysis, but the conclusions which he draws from his analysis, which are, in my opinion, truly facepalm-worthy. It appears that Curta either underestimates or deliberately downplays the extent to which post-Soviet Slavic scholarship has already moved away from the old primordialist narrative. Regardless of whether his blindness is willful or not, it leads him into truly quixotic badlands of fighting imaginary scholarly windmills, namely the allegedly persisting narrative that pre-Christian Slavs saw themselves as Slavs and were unified in their Slavness. I am yet to read a Slavic-born and educated scholar of Slavic studies who claims that pre-Christian Slavs identified themselves as Slavs. To my knowledge, with perhaps a few exceptions of Soviet-era scholars who did not follow evidence but Stalin's directive, all such claims, which, by the way, were made by 19th-century ethnos-obsessed romantics, were systematically dismantled and debunked. In Poland, primary school children are taught that pre-Christian tribes saw themselves as their own tribes, Polans, Drevlians, Obotrites, and others, and not as Slavs, and that it took a lot of effort, including fire and sword, to get them to accept any form of above tribal identity. I do realize that many, if not most, of you did not learn about the history of pre-Christian Slavs at school, so let me make an analogy to something hopefully more familiar to you, so you realize how pointless and moot Curta's book is. It is like arguing that the Danes, the Swedes, the Saxons, or, say, the Franks did not identify themselves as Germans, and then proceeding to write a whole book about how they did not identify themselves as Germans. Such a book could be based on an enormous amount of evidence and be written with rigorous scholarship, but it would still be a pointless book, because no one claims that all these Germanic tribes saw themselves as Germans. So basically, Curta constructs a book's worth of arguments against a claim that is not being made anywhere in sane, ethno-linguistically Slavic scholarship. Perhaps if The Making of the Slavs had been written at the beginning of the 20th century or published in Russian in the 1970s, it would have been an important publication. But as a tome published in 2001, it is, however well written, simply pointless. Because of the pointlessness of the book, I will not be putting it on the recommended reading list. Even though the book is enjoyable, Curta's argument made in the 21st century is moot, and his analyses do not bring anything new or important from the Slavic native faith perspective.